from Washington, D.C.
From Capitol Hill to our TV, radio audiences worldwide, welcome to a special edition of Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew, live on the Hill with Tyler Kendall joining from our Washington, D.C. bureau, as we're now just hours from the House voting to end an historic government shutdown.
House Democrats are strongly opposed to this partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people.
Republicans are going to deliver for the people. We're ready to get back to our legislative agenda. We have a very aggressive calendar for the remainder of this year. There'll be some long days and nights here, some long working weeks, but we will get this thing back on track.
We'll have our reporters plus lawmakers and political panelists all on hand as we report on how we got to this moment and where we go from here. Plus the other big story gripping Washington.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong.
The White House fielding questions related to Jeffrey Epstein after newly released emails from the disgraced financier appear to allege President Trump knew of his actions. It's something the president has repeatedly denied. We'll take you to the White House for the latest and discuss more with lawmakers as Arizona Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva is sworn in and puts her signature on a discharge petition that could lead lawmakers to a tough vote on the document's release.
Well, we begin this evening live here on Capitol Hill as lawmakers trickle in on planes, trains, automobiles, and yes, even a motorcycle, all to get here in time for a vote to reopen the government. That's expected to happen just hours from now. And joining us now live as we expect a series of voices from both sides of the aisle this evening, live from Capitol Hill, is Democratic Congresswoman Suzan DelBene of Washington, who chairs the DCCC and is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Madam Chair, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Was this all worth it?
Standing up for the American people is absolutely worth it. Folks are struggling with the skyrocketing costs that have happened under the policies of this administration and Republicans. They want folks who are going to stand up to lower costs, and Republicans promised to lower costs on day one. It's been a big broken promise, and now they are creating skyrocketing health care costs across the country. We could come together to address those costs, keep the government open, support programs that help the American people. But Republicans aren't interested in that. They're just blindly loyal to Donald Trump.
Well, I know that was the principle that drove you through this shutdown. But of course, some Democrats and an independent senator decided to cross the aisle and pass a bill in the Senate that brought us here tonight. Did they jump the gun on that? There's a promise for a vote on extending Obamacare subsidies in the Senate. But from what we understand, you don't have one here in the House. I
don't think that Mike Johnson will put a vote there. That's why we are pushing for a vote. We have a discharge petition to force a vote on the floor to extend the premium tax credits. We're going to continue to stand up and fight for working families and affordable quality health care across the country. I mean, this is a huge increase in costs on top of all the other costs, housing, food, energy costs. Republicans have impacted since they've been in power this year, damaging for families. Families are hurting across the country. They need representatives who are going to put them first.
Well, it's your job as chair of the DCCC to get Democrats elected in the midterms a little bit less than a year from now. You were quoted as saying it's time to start naming names. You'll be targeting specific Republicans in districts who voted to not fund SNAP benefits. How will you frame that? Because wasn't it Democrats who were voting against these bills?
Well, first of all, we have swing districts across the country, 35 districts, where we have opportunities to take back the majority in the House. We only need 3 more seats to take back the majority. Okay. And we need folks who are actually going to stand up for their communities. We have Republicans over and over who've said one thing, but in the end, they just vote in whatever way Donald Trump tells them to vote. They voted against their communities, against health care in their communities, against making sure that people have food, have affordable housing. You know, they should be accountable for their vote, and we're going to hold them accountable for what they actually do, which is give in to Donald Trump and prioritize the wealthiest and the well-connected.
It sounds like you're making campaign ads already with what's taken place over the last 7 weeks. Is that fair to say?
We're listening to people across the country. People have been clear. Yeah. Affordability is the #1 issue, and Republicans have done nothing but raise prices for working families and prioritize the wealthy and the well-connected. I mean, Trump can hold a big party and be indifferent to the struggles that at Mar-a-Lago and be indifferent to the struggles that American families are dealing with right now that he's helped create. We're going to stand up for those families.
Well, what happens after this? The government presumably this evening reopens. President signs the bill. We're off and running. There, I guess, will be a vote on the Senate side, as I mentioned, on extending Obamacare subsidies. Do you go immediately into negotiations here with Republicans in the House? Has that even been delineated? And if not, are we going to shut down again in January?
We're going to keep fighting. Turns out the fiscal year starts on October 1st, on October 1st every year. Republicans could have been at the table to prevent this situation from happening. They're in charge of the House, the Senate, the White House. They put us in a situation, they shut down the government. Now, over 50 days, we have not been in session in the House. Mike Johnson has kept folks away. I guess Republicans have been on vacation. All a chance for us to be working on policies to fund the government in a way that works for the American people. That hasn't been their priority. It absolutely is our priority.
Well, your newest member was sworn in a couple of hours ago, maybe less than that, in Adelita Grijalva, who is number 218 on a discharge petition to release the Epstein files. This has suddenly come up back to the surface in a series of emails that came from the Oversight Committee that were leaked to the media last night that seem to allege some involvement with Donald Trump. We're waiting to learn more on this. What will the discharge petition mean once it gets to the floor? Ro Khanna told us early December is likely for a vote.
First of all, it's way past time to have sworn in Adelita Grijalva. Her community has not had the representation they need because Mike Johnson unilaterally decided not to swear her in. So that's about time. The first thing she did after she gave her statement on being sworn on the floor was sign the discharge petition. This is about transparency, and the American people have demanded transparency. Republicans in the past have said they want transparency too. Release the files. Yes, it starts a clock, and right now, based on that clock, now that there's 218 signatures, it looks like we would likely vote at the beginning of December.
It doesn't appear that there's support to pass this in the Senate right now. Is this also an exercise for you, with the midterms in mind, getting Republicans on the record once and for all on these files?
This is about accountability. It's about listening to the American people and the demands of the American people. The American people ask for this. Republicans have talked about it in the past, but when push comes to shove and they actually can stand up and actually do something to stand up their communities, they run away scared. And they should be running scared because American people are tired of folks who are unwilling to put their priorities first. We see that across the country, and we're absolutely going to see that at the ballot box in 2026 when we take back the majority. Well, we appreciate your time now that we're back in session. We'd like to stay in touch with you through this midterm cycle. Congresswoman, thank you so much. Democratic Congresswoman Suzan DelBene, the chair of the DCCC, we thank you. Tyler, back to you in the studio.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Well, the other story, of course, as Joe was speaking about with the Congresswoman, is this morning emails released by the House Oversight Committee appeared to allege that President Trump spent hours with one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims and reportedly knew about Epstein's actions. Epstein writing in a 2011 email, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump," without specifying that he was referring to the then future president. Epstein went on to say that a victim had, quote, "spent hours at my house with him," and that, quote, "he has never once been mentioned," again, without directly identifying whom he was referring to. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about these developments earlier. Take a listen.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
Joining me now with the latest details is Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse, who's reporting live from the White House North Lawn. Skylar, we just heard the White House press secretary there. What other reaction and steps is the White House taking tonight as these emails come to light?
Absolutely, Tyler. Well, President Donald Trump today has been truthing just a bit on these emails. He is connecting the emails to calling it, this is a distraction for the Democrats as they try and navigate this shutdown. So that is the tone we are seeing from the president right now. And, there's still lots of questions, obviously, to get it from him, to get more of an idea of, what their relationship really was like. But the president today just has so far been truthing about the email, saying that this is a distraction for the Democrats as they navigate reopening the federal government. It'll be interesting to see how the White House continues to navigate these files. And this is especially one thing just to note that's really interesting for President Trump and for his voter base is Republicans who have supported Donald Trump have for a while now talked about how they would like to see more transparency around the Epstein case. So it'll be interesting to see how the administration moves forward with navigating the latest development here.
All right, great reporting, as President Trump has denied any knowledge of wrongdoing related to Epstein. Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse reporting live from the White House North Lawn tonight. Thank you so much. And let's now turn back to Joe Matthew on Capitol Hill for more on this and the shutdown, as he's joined by another special guest. Hey, Joe.
Yeah, we'll be hearing from a lot of them this evening, Tyler. Thank you. Joining us now live on Capitol Hill, Republican Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee, a member of both the House Oversight and House Transportation Committees. It's great to see you this evening. Welcome back to town. I hope you got in all right on a plane, a train, or an automobile.
I did.
Some folks are riding motorcycles, I understand.
Yeah, I have several motorcycles. Lady pilot, she was wonderful. I showed her a picture of my mama. My mama flew an airplane during the Second World War, and I told her how proud she'd have been.
How about that?
She'd have seen her. She'd probably just hugged her neck and walked on back to her seat.
Well, we thank the captain for getting the congressman back with us here. You just came up from the House floor.
Right.
If we can extend our conversation on the discharge petition and the Epstein files, you decided to make a move to bring this up for a vote immediately.
Yeah.
It didn't work out?
No. The Democrats have had this thing for 4 years. And let's be honest, if there's something in there detrimental to President Trump, Joe Biden would have released it. I mean, he's the
You think so?
Yeah, he's the Antichrist to the Democrats. They want to bury him as soon as they could. And then we, and we've had it for 9 months. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of all the pontificating back and forth. What's in there? What isn't in there? I think what you're seeing right now is both sides are taking out little pieces that fit their narrative out of context, maybe, or something that's been discharged as not legitimate, maybe. Yeah. I'm sure there's a legal term for that. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, it sounds like you have low expectations for what's inside.
I have low expectations for Congress, brother.
For Congress, okay.
Well, I tell you, when we had a closed-door meetings with some of the ladies, and of course they were girls at the time, and look,
the victims.
I hope Epstein's burning in hell right now. I've got no love lost for anybody that abuses a kid or a lady or anybody for that matter. But the truth is that when we started all this, both sides have said, what's in it, what's not in it,
right?
And nobody knows. But I'm in a closed-door meeting with some ladies that were abused by this dirtbag and some of his cohorts. And one of the women in there said, I want to be able to read the file so I know what happened to me. And she blacked out. Some people will mentally black something out. I could understand that. You don't want to remember something horrific like that. I guess God gave her that defense mechanism. But she wants to go back and read it. And I said, wait a minute. Do you want this? So you want this file released, right? And she said, no, I do not want it released. And so there's several of the ladies have said that. And there has to be a process, and I believe Chairman Comer is going through that process of rifling through the thousands and thousands of pages to protect some of those people. And I think we should do that. In my local newspaper, they were getting all over me, and I said, wait a minute, you all have a policy of never releasing folks, especially women, that have been raped or sexually abused. You release the name of the abuser and the guilty. And they said, well, yeah, but, and no, there is no yeah, but, or no. It is... there ought to be some decency in all this, and we should have a process in place to do that.
Well, what do you make of the visceral reaction that some of your Republican colleagues have had? We had quite a conversation with Mike Lawler on the air recently about this, who said that this is a Democrat scam, essentially, and that the Oversight Committee is doing the real work to release these files, that this is not something that Republicans should be taking apart.
Well, Lawler's from New York, so what can you say?
I don't know.
We'd say bless his heart, but that's all right. Well, Lawler's
How many Republicans do you... Ro Khanna told us today, your co-sponsor, there could be 40 or 50 Republicans on the House floor who vote for this.
Yeah, I'd say there probably is. I don't see how you don't vote for it, honestly. I think, though, that we need to have something in place to protect some of these people, though. Some of these ladies, girls at the time. And I was hoping that maybe we could do that, but politics has entered into it. And I think that shows what's really going on in the Democratic Party. They're not concerned about the people that are involved. They're concerned about political.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think that's probably the majority of them are, but some of them are clearly, they just hate Trump.
Yeah.
And they think they're going to embarrass him, and they'll release a few emails that are taken out of context or something that's not been verified, or worse, something that's been thrown out is negligible or that's inaccurate. And they'll take it as fact, and then you'll have to rehear all of that. And that's what it'll be. We'll hear that for the next however many years.
What do you make of President Trump reportedly trying to peel Lauren Boebert off the discharge petition?
I couldn't even comment on that. I don't know anything about that. I haven't talked to Boebert. But
she's apparently still on board, but that was, I guess, quite the powwow at the White House today.
Okay.
Should he be worried?
Should what?
Should the president be worried?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Like I said, if there was something in there on Trump, I'm sure Biden would have released it. He had those files for 4 dadgum years. I mean, I've talked to legal experts. A guy back home, Teddy Davis, legal expert. We've gone over this thing 1,000 times over all the backwards and forwards and things that could be in there and might not be in there. And so I just don't. I don't have a lot of faith in what's in there and what isn't in there right now. I think if they should have released the files a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because right now it's just all politics.
Well, the work at hand this evening beyond politics is reopening the government. Looks like the speaker's got the votes. You can tell me if that's not the case. Do you worry about another shutdown in January if there's no agreement on subsidies?
I do. I voluntarily didn't take a pay. I got kids and young people in my office. Sure. It's their only source of income, and it's my only source of income. I have a mortgage. I have a car payment. I have to feed a family, and I worry about, and I exactly know what they're going through. And the TSA, those great folks. I've met with them back in Knoxville. I didn't run from any of them. Folks, energy situation, some poor folks. I met with our local group that helps facilitate that and helps manage those things and work people through the bureaucratic system that we've created to help people, but it's really just choking them. And we were able to work some things out. So, I worry about all those folks. And I worry about it in January because it'll be cold again. Yeah. And I don't, poor folks.
Should the speaker tell Democrats we'll get a vote on Obamacare subsidies like John Thune did?
I don't know. I don't know. I think what we better do is try to fix Obamacare. We're not fixing it by adding $1 trillion in it. And the Democrats, shame on them. They created it, and they knew when the drop dead date was, when the money was going to run out. And then Schumer tried to put it right before the next election. And so just do it now. Let's negotiate now. And let's get on with it. But we won't, because nobody has the guts to do anything on either side of the aisle, brother. I do. I mean, I like what Trump said about it. Put it in a fund where they can only address it. Cut those, the money changers are the insurance people in this thing. They got billion-dollar profits, paying million-dollar salaries, and the people are getting less care, and it's going up. Next time, let's try this. Let's take the doctors and the patients, and let's let them negotiate and cut out the money changer. Kick them out of the temple, brother. I'm ready. I don't like them.
Let's get on with it, he says. Republican Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee. It's great to see you again. Brother. We'll see if we can get the government reopened. Tyler, we'll turn back to you in our Washington bureau.
All right, great conversation, Joe. And sounds like we're about to hear a lot of different proposals when it comes to the future of health care. We'll have much more on that, as well as the legal questions from the latest Epstein document release with a former federal prosecutor up ahead. And we'll continue our special coverage when Republican Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin joins us live from Capitol Hill. That's all ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
It's a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tyler Kendall live in our Washington bureau. I'm Joe Matthew on Capitol Hill. For more on one of the other biggest stories we're tracking today, we turn to Tyler right now in our Washington bureau. Tyler?
All right, thanks, Joe. Well, as we get closer to the looming vote to reopen the government, we also have our eyes on those other developments out of Capitol Hill. Headlines were made this morning following the release of thousands of Jeffrey Epstein emails, intensifying scrutiny over the president's relationship with the disgraced financier. Earlier today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed these newly released emails by taking aim at the Democrats. Here's a listen.
This administration has done more than any, and it just shows how this is truly a manufactured hoax by the Democrat Party, for now they're talking about it all of a sudden because President Trump is in the Oval Office. But when Joe Biden was sitting in there, the Democrats never brought this up. This wasn't an issue that they cared about because they actually don't care about the victims in these cases. They care about trying to score political points against President Trump, as we have, of course, seen with this government shutdown.
Joining me now for more is Sarah Krissoff, partner at Cozen O'Connor. She's also a former federal prosecutor with the Southern District of New York. Sarah, welcome to Bloomberg. And let's just start with where this is headed. There's now enough signatures on this discharge petition. It's our understanding the House is going to vote in December, but then it goes to the Senate. And then would it go to President Trump's desk? Does he ultimately have the final say on whether or not these documents are going to be released?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is going to be the course of events here, right? And this sort of it is very hard. We're watching these documents sort of come out in dribs and drabs, and it's hard to assess them, in small chunks, right? And it's also hard for the public to assess them. We can look at 1 or 2 or 3 emails that are highlighted by Congress, but just to look at a huge tranche of emails, 20,000, 30,000 emails, that's just something that, the average person is not able to do. Although, frankly, with AI assistance, it's much easier to do that nowadays.
So what are the legal questions here now? Does this create legal exposure for the president, or does this all revolve around an otherwise closed case?
So I think these 3 emails that were released by the Democrats are not good for President Trump. He certainly will seek to distance himself from them. He will negate them. He will deny, that they're, you have to read between the lines and make a lot of inferences when you're reading an email. And the inferences can be drawn either way, but they're certainly not good for him. But we are seeing documents being released in sort of so many different forums here. We have some from Congress. We have some from the litigation against the banks related to the financing for Epstein. And so, there's sort of pockets of information and certainly, and also documents released from the DOJ investigation already, and maybe more to come, although who knows if that's going to happen. And so, I'm certain there are people who are spending a lot of time pouring through those and seeing sort of what story they can piece together from that.
Well, in the final minute that I have you, since you mentioned the DOJ's investigation, what does this mean for Ghislaine Maxwell? She's currently serving a 20-year sentence, but it appears that her testimony to the Deputy Attorney General might be refuted by some of the things that we're learning in these emails.
Yeah, there is no question that was really a softball interview. Todd Blanche let Ghislaine Maxwell lead that interview. He didn't press her on tough questions, and he didn't really use documents that he could have used to jam her up. He let her tell her side of the story and didn't challenge that in any way. So, I mean, that interview, I think, would have looked a lot different if he had used emails like this and other tough documents to really question her.
All right, a story that we're going to continue to cover here at Bloomberg. Sarah Krissoff, partner at Cozen O'Connor and former federal prosecutor with the Southern District of New York. Thank you so much for joining us here on Bloomberg. We're going to have much more of our special coverage go back to Capitol Hill and Joe Matthew as the House prepares for a big vote to reopen the government. We're inching closer to that. Stick with us. We're going to have more lawmakers, including Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin. That's up next here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
It's a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew, live on Capitol Hill, where the House is just a short time away from voting on a budget plan that would reopen the government. The House convening for the first time now in over 50 days. So we're seeing a flurry of activity on Capitol Hill and a vote that could stretch into the 8 or 9 o'clock hours, depending on who we're talking to. It's difficult to get a sense of exactly when this is done, but the president has indicated that he is ready to sign this bill once it's passed. And joining us now live on the Hill with everything we need to watch tonight on the the House floor and beyond is Bloomberg's Erik Wasson, who's been on Capitol Hill for the balance of this shutdown. It's great to see you, Erik. How is the timeline looking here? They'll get this done tonight?
It looks like it's going to be about 8 p.m. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has the ability to speak for an unlimited amount of time. During the big, beautiful tax bill, he spoke for hours and hours, but we're told by his aides maybe about 30 minutes. So we're saying about 8 or 9 o'clock that this will be done, and I'm expecting the government to be open by Thursday morning for most federal workers.
Got it. It's going to take some time, though, to restore pay for those workers, to restore SNAP benefits.
That's right.
Never mind ironing out the airline system.
Yeah, people are going hungry because of this. We're hearing a Bloomberg government has a story just out now, 1 to 3 days in some states, but up to a week in other states. There's a lot of confusing guidance from the Department of Agriculture about what went on during the lapse with states providing temporary benefits they may have to pay back to the federal government. So there's a lot of confusion that's been created.
Yeah.
Airlines also facing continued backlog perhaps for weeks.
It's going to be a while we're talking about this, no matter what happens tonight, it sounds like. Bloomberg's Erik Wasson, thank you. Tyler, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks so much, Joe, for that update. And another story, of course, that we've been tracking today at Bloomberg is Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic announcing he plans to retire at the end of his current term. That's in February. Joining me now with the details here in our Washington bureau is Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe. Amara, what do we know about Bostic's resignation? And can we also put this in broader context? What does this mean for the central bank during a year where we've seen a lot of pressure on the FOMC?
Yes, this year has been crazy for Fed coverage. A lot of pressure on the Fed from the White House, of course, lower interest rates, and a lot of personnel changes throughout the year as well. And President Bostic is just the latest in that. This resignation will come at a time when the Fed is facing a very difficult policy calculus, of course, because we have some policymakers that are concerned about inflation, are a little bit hesitant to do more rate cuts, and we have others who are more concerned about the labor market, and they want to do more rate cuts. So we have the policy backdrop. President Bostic, in the announcement that came from the Atlanta Fed today, didn't give a reason for his resignation, but the backdrop is also really interesting. We have the reappointments of the regional Fed presidents right now. The Fed's Board of Governors here in Washington is doing that right now, where they reappoint all of the regional presidents. This is a process that happens every 5 years. And of course, we do have that backdrop where there is a lot of pressure from the White House. We have the search for a new Fed chair. So a lot of interesting things happening in the backdrop of this resignation announcement from Bostic.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the search for the next Fed chair, because we heard from one of those contenders earlier, NEC Director Kevin Hassett. He was in conversation with peer-to-peer host on Bloomberg, David Rubenstein, and he was asked about the future path of monetary policy. And he said that if he was reading the tea leaves, here's where he thinks that's headed.
I would guess that the fact that he came in signaling less likely to move makes the likelihood of them deciding to go 50 basis points lower.
You think it's more likely to do 50 than 25?
No, I think they're not likely to do 50.
50? More likely to do 25?
I think that's probably what. I mean, I'm reading the tea leaves that they're showing us.
Would that satisfy the president, you think?
I think that the president thinks rates could be a lot lower.
When we're talking about the future path of monetary policy, how does this square with the little data that we've been able to get from the government amid this shutdown?
Well, the lack of data is one of the things that is complicating the policy calculus for the Fed right now. And the idea that a quarter-point cut next month is guaranteed, Chair Powell said at the last press conference, far from it, right? Policymakers are really divided about the outlook for policy. Some want more cuts. Some are more hesitant because of the inflation outlook. So, we'll see. I mean, it's very much an open question what's going to happen in December.
All right, we'll be covering it all here on Bloomberg. Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe, thank you so much. And for more, let's turn now to Joe Matthew, who is live on Capitol Hill.
Tyler, thanks. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin, who chairs the House Administration Committee. He's also a member of House Financial Services, which is why you see him and hear from him pretty often here on Bloomberg. Welcome back to Washington. It's good to see you, Congressman. Absolutely. Give us a sense of what's going to take place in the next couple of hours here. We're told that Speaker Johnson has the votes. Will there be any troublemakers, or is this as good as past?
And I think we're just hours away from having this federal government finally reopened. I think it's going to reaffirm what we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
We should have never shut the federal government down in the first place. No one benefits. A lot of people were hurt. And I think at the end of the day, Democrats will look back and recognize that this was a failure, that they should have never shut the federal government down. But the good news is, by the end of the night tonight, the federal government is on its way to being reopened.
Well, it's curious because Democrats had told us repeatedly that there needed to be a deal on Obamacare subsidies to reopen the government, that a promise of a vote was not enough. There isn't even the promise of a vote in the House. Should there be?
Well, there is a need to address the rising cost of health care. What we don't want to do is negotiate under the brinksmanship in the hostage taking that the Democrats were trying to do. And what Democrats in the Senate were willing to do was filibuster really important spending on food stamps, spending to pay air traffic controllers, the TSA agents, failure to pay hardworking men and women who are serving the federal government. And so as that pain built, I think what we saw was pressure saying, the brinksmanship, the American people have seen enough. Calmer heads, allow us to negotiate fiscal year 26 approach, as well as other policy priorities, including the work that's going to be needed to lower the cost of health care for hardworking families.
Well, so what do you want to see happen when everyone gets back to work for real next week? Are there going to be sideline negotiations? Does leadership need to actually grab the bull by the horns here and get to the bottom of this health care dispute? Does it need to happen organically? What will we see?
I think there's a number of things. Yeah. I think, one, we have a real need and opportunity to get back to regular order as it relates to the appropriations process. While 3 of the 12 spending bills will be completed tonight, 9 remain unfinished.
That would be a Christmas miracle if you got this done, right?
Well, even if we take some baby steps into this, right? This is a muscle memory that's been completely lost on Capitol Hill. It has been decades and decades since this process has worked appropriately before. Maybe coming out of this, there's an opportunity to change course and fix that. As it relates to the healthcare side, I think there are going to be negotiations and conversations. The structure of the Affordable Care Act subsidies as drafted by Democrats to go to insurance companies to expire this year, the program was ripe with waste, fraud, and abuse. And you can look at the Biden Treasury Department exploring exactly how that structure wasn't to the benefit of a lot of families, but was padding the pockets of insurance companies. And so I think we have an opportunity to go back and explore how we make sure that these funds are actually providing lower costs of health care for families, but not padding the pockets of insurance companies across the country.
Well, you see what the president's suggesting, send cash directly to people, let them negotiate with health insurers. That might give people a little bit of concern. He says they'll feel entrepreneurial, but that would be pretty complicated for some people. And a lot of Democrats say, give us your plan. What is the Republican plan to replace Obamacare? Or, Congressman, is it not that? It's to reform Obamacare.
I think there is no one silver bullet that solves the problem. I do think that there are a number of things that we should be working at in doing to lower the cost of health care. One, the president's doing a great job as it relates to lowering the cost of drugs for American families. That's a piece of the puzzle. I think as it relates to the Affordable Care Act, what we saw was a lot of the subsidies that went to the insurance companies were tied to individuals making well beyond the federal poverty wage, individuals that could make up to $600,000 a year. And so what we need to do is focus the federal tax dollars that are being spent in healthcare to make sure that we're providing assistance to those who need it, and then get market forces back at work. And I think what the president's directionally talking about providing resources directly to hardworking families rather than insurance companies is putting the power back in the consumer's hand and away from the insurance companies. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, this will be a fascinating debate when we get back around to this at some point, hopefully soon, Congressman. I want to ask you about reporting about what's happening in your committee, the administration committee, that would reportedly have a hearing next week on a stock trading ban for members of Congress. Is that something you're about to take up?
We want to make sure that no members of Congress are profiting from insider information. I think that is imperative and incredibly important for the American people. We're going to be having a hearing looking at what is currently occurring and whether or not reforms are needed. But I think we have a huge opportunity to make sure that no member of Congress, no elected official, is leveraging inside information to their financial benefit.
That would be a pretty big deal, and it's something that's been controversial in principle. It sounds like it's something that you support.
There should be, we need to look at what's going on and to make sure that individuals are not benefiting from inside information. I think that is absolutely imperative, and I think it is a fundamental principle that individuals who are elected are not profiting from their positions.
Come to 30,000 feet with me before we wrap up, Congressman, because you've got a lot of important relationships here on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle. And we hear a lot about the lack of trust, the breakdown in relationships between Democrats and Republicans that have brought us to the longest shutdown in American history. What are you doing to reach across the aisle to get to know people? You see them in the gym in the morning? Do you go out for dinner at night? How do we get beyond this?
There's a lot more conversations that are occurring than I think often make the eye of the media.
That's got to be true.
And if we look to jump to another committee, to the Financial Services Committee where I serve, I chair the subcommittee on digital assets.
Yeah.
We move forward transformational digital assets legislation earlier this year in the Genius Act, as well as passing Clarity, which will hopefully clear the Senate. Both of those with well over 2/3 of the entire United States House of Representatives coming together in support of that. And so I think there needs to be more work on substantive policy in Washington, D.C., but also maybe a little bit more attention from the broader media landscape that we have as to where things are going right, but not lost in anybody. There is way too much partisanship, way too much brinksmanship in Washington, but we all have a role to try to move that forward.
It's only gotten worse since you've gotten here, right? Can it get better before you leave?
Well, it can't get too much worse in some ways.
That's true.
And so hopefully we start to see this pendulum shift back as we come out of this shutdown. A shutdown truly that was absolutely unnecessary, brought to us by Democrats filibustering a clean CR. If we come out of this with anything, hopefully it's returning back to regular order, bringing down the brinksmanship and engaging in some of those serious policy debates that we need.
Thanks for sitting down with us before the big vote. Republican Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin, we thank you. I want to send it back to Tyler Kendall in our Washington bureau. Tyler?
All right. Thanks, Joan. We have much more coming up, including JFK's grandson announced his bid for Congress, now officially entering the race for a seat in New York's 12th district. We'll bring you those details. And we're hours away from a vote that could finally end the longest shutdown in U.S. history. We'll discuss what next and what we're watching when we assemble our political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. I'm Joe Matthew, live on Capitol Hill. And we'll turn back to tonight's House votes in just a moment. First, Tyler, what are we watching in tonight's Power Brief?
Thanks, Joe. Well, first up, new data today from Fitch showing that more Americans than ever are falling behind on their car payments. The share of subprime borrowers that are at least 60 days past due on auto loans rising to 6.65%. That's the highest rate since this data collection started more than 30 years ago. The millions of credit borrowers now behind on payments have caused a reckoning for major financial institutions ahead of the next Fed decision. Plus, the U.S. minted its final penny today after the president canceled production of the 1-cent coin due to rising costs. President Trump said the nearly 4-cent per penny cost renders the coins obsolete, though they still have a better production cost to value ratio than the nickel, which costs nearly 14 cents to make. Retailers are voicing concerns about how to deal with the abrupt phase out and lack of government guidance. Some companies rounding down prices to avoid shortchanging customers, and others requiring exact change. And Jack Schlossberg, the 32-year-old grandson of John F. Kennedy, announced his bid for Congress. He's seeking the Democratic nomination for New York's 12th district, which includes the Upper West Side, Upper East Side, and Midtown Manhattan. This as Congressman Jerry Nadler announced he will not seek re-election to that seat. Schlossberg said he's running on a platform of fighting corruption and addressing the cost of living crisis, also taking aim at President Trump's decision to send National Guard troops to U.S. cities. But of course, it is the big shutdown vote happening soon, and the new Epstein emails making headlines. That's our main focus tonight here in Washington. And joining me now in Bureau with their reactions to these stories and more is this evening's political panel. Roger Fisk, former aide to President Obama and Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Thank you both for being here. And Sarah, I'm going to start with you, and I don't mean to sound pessimistic because we are all looking forward to this government reopening the vote tonight, but are we just setting up for potentially the government shutting down again on January 30th? Because while some key agencies are funded through the fiscal year, this stopgap measure only goes until the end of January.
I'd say there's 50-50 chance that we close down again. I think a lot of that's going to be up to the Democrats again. I mean, they caused the shutdown. Do they really want to go through this again? But I do think in the meantime, we will have a serious discussion about health care, ACA, and we really need to lay it all on the table because it is getting very expensive. We can't just keep throwing money at it.
So if this comes down to a deal on health care, what is that going to look like? Are we expecting there to be even a vote in the House when it comes to an extension like we're seeing in the Senate, or are we talking about a totally new plan that has to come to fruition?
I think in the context of the calendar, I always think of like, what is there bandwidth for something, a comprehensive standalone piece of legislation? And I think the answer is no. I'm surprised, frankly, that the Republicans didn't see a window to do something like extend the subsidies for Obamacare up through 2026 and kind of pull it off the table for the midterms, similar to how some of the various tax credits have been framed around the midterm calendar as well. But I don't think that there's time, and especially with the functionality that we see between the leadership and the factions in both parties, in both chambers, to get something of like an entirely standalone, sovereign, single health care proposal through. It's an incredibly thorny set of issues. I think it's more about getting funding in place so that even the Republicans might see the logic in punting the entire Obamacare issue past the midterms.
Sarah, what's your assessment here? Is that the realistic timeline that we're looking at, or could we see something sooner because these premium subsidies under the Affordable Care Act are expiring at the end of the year?
Well, I know the Republicans do want to do something sooner. I mean, we've been talking about health care now for the last few months. We understand there's a problem. We understand the ACA, there's an issue with how much the rates are going up for the American people. But we really need to have a real discussion around the entire health care. We can't just keep, as I said earlier, we can't just keep throwing money at it and trying to lower people's premiums. There's a health care problem in this country that needs to be addressed, and it's needed to be addressed for years. So I think we'll have real discussions on that.
Well, I do want to bring in Joe Matthew on Capitol Hill because he's been asking these questions to lawmakers, too, trying to figure out what the path forward is. Because, Joe, of course, we're inching closer to that vote, but we're not there yet, and there's other deadlines looming.
Yeah, we're not there yet. And if Sarah Chamberlain's putting 50-50 on a shutdown in January, I'm not betting my pennies on how that's going to turn out tonight because they're running short around here. Sarah, I'm just curious, when we talk about debating health care reform, we've heard from Democrats and Republicans over the course of this hour this evening. Does there need to be a deal by the end of January to avoid a shutdown, or does Speaker Johnson promise a vote the way John Thune did in the Senate?
I think at this point there would be a promise of a vote. I don't really know if we can get all this solved by the end of June with Thanksgiving and Christmas in there, to be honest. But we are really going to give it a best shot. And also what Bryan Steil said earlier, we need to go back to regular order and start trying to pass these appropriation bills so we don't have to have this every few months, this crisis.
Regular order, Roger. I don't know if you can think back that far, but there are a lot of energized Democrats here tonight. One of them, we spoke with Suzan DelBene, who chairs the DCCC. If you listen to her talk, Roger, you'll get the message pretty quickly that she's already making campaign ads and isolating specific Republicans who she says voted against extending health care subsidies. What is this midterm cycle going to look like in terms of messaging based on what happened in this shutdown?
Well, we can just look at last Tuesday and the mantra of affordability and feel pretty safe forecasting that into the future. You know, for some reason, the healthcare news comes to the kitchen table always in the fall. I remember back when I was in the Senate, we were dealing with HMOs. The new costs for the upcoming year would always come out in the last week of October. And so if you were in cycle that last week of October, you had to have a very comprehensive plan in place, both legislatively and in terms of communications and the politics of it in your home state to deal with that. Because when that family sits down and all of a sudden their $1,100 a month is going to go to $2,400 a month or something like that, that's a huge jump. When I was listening to your guest earlier, Joe, that you had from Wisconsin, he was largely explaining a lot of what Obamacare is. We need to remember this is actually a creature from the Heritage Foundation, first tested by Governor Romney in the state of Massachusetts, which is to say a mandate on the individual to go to the marketplace, and the marketplace being the key term here. And then last is, at the end of all this, at the end of the rainbow, if the Republicans don't deal with this, you're going to see more and more rural people going to the emergency room for more care, which are already challenged based on the Medicaid cuts that are going to be coming through the pipeline. And I've said this before on my visits here, but rural hospitals, rural hospitals, rural hospitals, so much of this is going to surface right there. And if the Republicans don't at least work with the Democrats to try to fix this, then incumbents across both sides of the aisle are going to have to answer for that.
Sarah, did members hear about this when they were home? Because this The House members were out since September 19th. I'm wondering if you could give us any insight into what they were doing while they were home, because they weren't on Capitol Hill.
And they were not on vacation, like the Democrats want to claim they were. They were out talking to their constituents on a regular basis. And what they're hearing is, they are hearing concerns about the cost of ACA. But what they're also hearing is overall the cost of insurance. Like, what is happening with the health care cost of insurance in our country? And that's bothering them. Yeah, you can fix ACA for a year or two. But the real issue is the premiums keep going up and up. We can try to subsidize them, but the health care costs in this country are really out of control. That's what they're hearing back home in their districts.
All right, well, this issue isn't going away. And another issue of the day that we wanted to ask you both about, but also doesn't seem to be going away, are these newly released emails related to Jeffrey Epstein. And Roger, we just saw the newly sworn in Congresswoman Grijalva already sign that discharge petition. The Congresswoman told Joe at the beginning of the show this vote is set for the beginning of December. But then the Senate has to also vote on this, and then this goes to President Trump's desk. Realistically, are these files going to be released?
At some point, yes. The truth will out. To take your calendar framework, then it could then dovetail into next year, which is going to be a different Congress, obviously. The administration's posture on this, I think, is very unwise. Their words are saying that they're not concerned about this, but their feet are saying something quite different. And it seems to me that the pressure that's been put on Speaker Johnson to try to slow roll this and keep the Congresswoman-elect from becoming a Congresswoman and having this discharge petition that you're mentioning now come out. They just need to understand that this is going to come out whatever it is, and it's best to go back to the George Stephanopoulos idea of tell it all, tell it quick, and then move on to other things, because in this day and age, this is going to come out sooner or later.
We have just about a minute. Sarah, I'm curious your thoughts on this. To Roger's point, why not just rip off the Band-Aid, have Republicans sign on to the discharge petition, knowing that it's not likely to pass the Senate, and even if it does, the president wouldn't sign it?
Well, and you may see a few more Republicans doing just that. I do want to highlight the Speaker said the first thing he would do when the government got ready to reopen is to swear her in, and he did today. But you also see the committee releasing a lot of the transcripts already. I mean, and some of them have been somewhat damaging to President Trump. Yeah. So the committee is getting them out there. I don't really know if we need to do the whole discharge to do this, because they are coming out slowly, as Roger said. It is going to get out there, a matter of time. But next 2 or 3 months, you're going to see a lot of material out there in the public, and we'll have to see where it falls.
All right, we'll see where that does fall. Our political panel tonight, Roger Fisk and Sarah Chamberlain, thank you both for being here. And Joe, we are inching closer to that vote on Capitol Hill. Wondering what the mood's like there as we enter this countdown clock.
Yeah, they're ready to get, I think, back to business here, Tyler. To your point, it's been a long time, about a month and a half since lawmakers have been together in the House. Everyone seems to have a good feeling for where this is going, and both sides are going to try to harness this energy and the message to come out of tonight and power their way through the midterm election cycle. You had some redistricting, Tyler, and it's going to be a complicated year ahead.
All right, well, we'll have coverage all night. Thanks for joining us here on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg from Joe Matthew and me. We'll see you tomorrow.